The rain poured down steadily, each drop a tiny hammer against the window of my cramped office. It mirrored the ceaseless drumming in my own head, a rhythm of anxieties that had become the soundtrack of my life. It wasn't the gentle, rhythmic kind either. It felt like each impact against the glass was accompanied by a minuscule, splintering crack somewhere deep inside my skull. Outside, the city was a blur of grey, the towering skyscrapers lost in the perpetual twilight that had become the norm these last few years. Climate change, they called it, a polite term for a slow, agonizing suffocation. We were boiling in a pot, the heat increasing degree by agonizing degree, and no one seemed to know how to turn the burner off. The news, when I dared to watch it, was a carousel of floods, fires, and famines, punctuated by the increasingly desperate pronouncements of politicians who offered platitudes instead of solutions. They were fiddling, quite literally, while Rome, or rather the entire planet, burned. It was during those times that I wished I could be anywhere but here, anywhere but Earth. My focus drifted to the framed photograph on my desk, the one constant in this ever-shifting world. Sarah. Her smile, captured in a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, was a knife twist in my gut. Her dark, intelligent eyes, full of a life that had been cruelly extinguished, seemed to follow me, a silent reproach. We had been two halves of a whole, both dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of the human mind. She, a neuropsychologist, mapping the physical terrain of the brain. Me, a psychologist navigating the pathways of consciousness, trauma, and memory. But some things, some illnesses, defy mapping. Hers had been one of those. A rare, aggressive cancer that had devoured her from the inside out, leaving me hollowed and adrift in its wake. The irony wasn't lost on me. We spent our lives trying to heal minds, and in the end, we couldn't even heal her body. Her death had shattered my faith in everything, including, and perhaps especially, the existence of a benevolent higher power. If there was a God, he, she, or it certainly didn't give a damn about Sarah, or me, or any of us really. I became quite cynical after that. My work became my refuge, a way to numb the pain, or at least to compartmentalize it. I specialized in trauma, in helping people piece together the shattered fragments of their lives after experiencing events that were too bizarre to fully process. PTSD, repressed memories, dissociative disorders, these were the landscapes I navigated daily. I was good at it, one of the best. My ability to guide patients through deep hypnosis to unlock the doors to their subconscious was renowned, if not always understood. But it was a lonely profession, a constant immersion in the darkness of others, a darkness that often mirrored my own. It felt like I was surrounded by broken people, including myself. And then there was the Starseeker. In a world starved for hope, the mission had been a shining beacon. The first manned interstellar voyage, a bold leap into the vast unknown. It captured the world's imagination like nothing else in my lifetime. For a brief, glorious moment, humanity seemed united, our petty squabbles and earthly concerns dwarfed by the sheer audacity of the endeavor. I remember the global celebrations, the collective holding of breath as the 5 brave souls, Commander Jonathan Hudson, Dr. Astrid Nielsen, Captain Ben Carter, Dr. Wei Li, and Lieutenant Jake O'Brien, embarked on their journey to Proxima Centauri b, a potentially habitable planet orbiting the closest star to our own. Their mission was one of discovery, one of the search for life. A one-way trip, they said. We all knew that they would never come back. Or so we thought. I, too, had been swept up in the excitement, though my enthusiasm was tempered by a healthy dose of skepticism. Space was a harsh mistress, unforgiving of even the slightest error. And the distances involved were staggering, almost incomprehensible to the human mind. Still, I admired their courage, their willingness to sacrifice everything in the pursuit of knowledge. We watched them on our screens, waving to the camera as they entered the ship. I remember the cheers, the hope, the optimism. It felt like we might actually make it as a species. Then silence. Not the gradual fading of a signal, but an abrupt, terrifying cessation of all communication. One moment they were there, transmitting data and images back to Earth. The next, nothing. It was as if the Starseeker and its crew had simply vanished into the void. The world mourned. Memorials were erected. The crew of the Starseeker became martyrs, symbols of humanity's ambition and the tragic cost of reaching for the stars. The project was ultimately shut down after much debate. We were not ready, they decided. The mission went from being a symbol of hope to a stark reminder of our limitations. We returned our focus to the problems here on Earth. Years passed. The world moved on as it always does. The memory of the Starseeker faded, becoming a footnote in the history books, a poignant reminder of a dream deferred. But deep down the questions remained. What happened to them? Did they suffer? Did they even make it to their destination? Or did they encounter something else out there in the black? The rain outside intensified. A sudden, violent gust of wind rattled the window, pulling me back to the present. It was then that the news broke. News so shocking, so utterly improbable, that it seemed to upend the very fabric of reality. The Starseeker had returned. It was first spotted by an amateur astronomer, a tiny blip of light moving at an impossible speed. Then, it was confirmed by the major observatories. The ship, or at least a ship that looked identical to the Starseeker, had reappeared in our solar system, decelerating at a rate that defied our understanding of physics. They hailed us, and we answered. They were coming home. The world went mad. The news, which had for so long been a litany of despair, exploded with a frenzy of speculation and excitement. The crew, presumed dead for decades, was alive, but they were different, changed. The first images showed them emerging from the ship, not in spacesuits but in ordinary clothes. They seemed unharmed, even healthy, but there was something else, something in their eyes, in the way they moved, that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't natural. It was almost regal. Then came the demonstrations of their powers. Commander Hudson, in a live broadcast seen by billions, calmly lifted a massive transport vehicle with his mind, held it suspended in midair for a full minute, and then gently set it back down. Others displayed similar feats, precognitive abilities, accelerated healing, manipulation of matter at a molecular level. They claimed they had encountered a benevolent alien intelligence, a higher form of life that had bestowed these gifts upon them, making them the vanguard of a new era for humanity. They were, they said, no longer mere mortals. They were gods or something very close to it. The world was captivated, divided between awe, fear, and a deep, unsettling skepticism. Believers, as they quickly became known, embraced the returned crew as saviors, prophets of a new age. They flocked to them, desperate for a miracle, for a solution to the endless problems that plagued our world. The skeptics, a smaller but vocal group, questioned the crew's motives, the source of their powers, and the potential for abuse. Governments, caught off guard and utterly unprepared for this new reality, scrambled to understand and, if possible, control the situation. The old rules no longer applied. The world, my world, the one I thought I understood, had been irrevocably altered. My old life felt like a distant memory, something that was over. This was the new normal, like it or not. A sharp rap on my office door startled me. Agent Rebecca Rodriguez stood in the doorway, her dark eyes filled with urgency and apprehension. She was a woman who had seen too much, done too much, a veteran of countless covert operations. We had a history, a complicated one, built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared understanding of the darker corners of human nature. She worked for a branch of the government so secretive, most people didn't even know it existed. We did some work together in the past, but that was a long time ago. Dr. Maxwell, we need you. I figured as much, I replied, a sigh escaping my lips. Let me guess. The gods need a shrink. Something like that, she said, stepping into the office and closing the door behind her. We need to know what's really going on inside their heads. We need to know if they're telling the truth. We need to know what happened out there. The agency was divided on what to do. Some wanted to embrace the crew, to learn from them, to use their powers for the benefit of humanity. Others were wary, distrustful, fearing a hidden agenda, a Trojan horse scenario. There were even some who wanted the crew eliminated, seeing them as an existential threat. Agent Rodriguez, however, was in the middle. She did not trust the crew, nor did she trust her superiors. "And you think I'm the one who can find out?" I asked, gesturing to the photograph of Sarah. I'm not exactly known for my faith in higher powers these days. In fact, I was about the most skeptical person they could have chosen. You're the best there is at getting inside people's heads, David. And right now, that's exactly what we need. Besides, she added, a hint of a wry smile touching her lips, your skepticism might just be your greatest asset. She also knew about my skills, about my ability to get people to open up, to reveal their deepest, darkest secrets. She knew I was the only one who could do this. I looked at her, at the rain still lashing against the window, at the city shrouded in grey. I thought of Sarah, of the Star Seeker, of the impossible reality that had unfolded before my eyes. A part of me, the cynical, world-weary part, wanted to say no, to retreat further into the solitude of my grief and my work. But another part, a part I thought long dead, stirred within me. A flicker of curiosity, a sense of responsibility, perhaps even a sliver of hope. We were on the precipice of something monumental, something that could either save us or destroy us. And I, a broken, cynical psychologist, had been given a front-row seat. This was important, maybe the most important thing humanity had ever faced. The crew was clearly dangerous, powerful, but where did these powers come from? All right, Rebecca, let's go meet the gods. The ride to the facility was a blur of rain-streaked asphalt and the flashing red and blue lights of our escort. The city was eerily subdued. People were staying indoors, glued to their screens, watching the unfolding drama of the returned Starseeker crew. Or perhaps they were simply afraid. Fear seemed to linger in the background, shaping every exchange. You could see it in the way people avoided eye contact, in the hurried pace of their steps, in the nervous glances they cast at the sky, as if expecting divine retribution, or perhaps salvation, to rain down upon them at any moment. It was clear that they viewed the crew as some type of divine beings, even though no one could fully comprehend what that meant. The facility itself was a nondescript concrete block, tucked away in a corner of an industrial district. It looked abandoned, almost derelict, the kind of place you'd drive past 1,000 times without ever noticing. But beneath the surface, it was a hive of activity. Observation rooms and heavily guarded laboratories. This was where the government was keeping the returned crew, ostensibly for their protection, but also, I suspected, for observation and, if necessary, containment. They were trying to understand what they were dealing with before making any major decisions. My first impression of the returned astronauts was a study in contrasts. They were physically present, undeniably real, yet there was something unnervingly alien about them. Commander Jonathan Hudson, the charismatic leader, greeted us with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a practiced, almost plastic expression, the kind you see on politicians or actors, not someone who had just returned from the depths of interstellar space. His eyes, though, were different. They held a depth, a stillness, that seemed to absorb the light around them, making it difficult to look away. It felt like he was analyzing you, seeing right through you and all your facades. His presence dominated the room, his voice smooth and measured, yet carrying an undercurrent of something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. He seemed so sure of himself, so confident. It was unnerving. The other crew members, Dr. Astrid Nielsen, Captain Ben Carter, Dr. Wei Li and Lieutenant Jake O'Brien, were more subdued, their movements precise, almost robotic. They seemed to defer to Hudson, their gazes constantly flicking towards him, as if seeking guidance or approval. It was clear who was in charge. There was a strange uniformity to their demeanor, a lack of individual quirks or emotional responses that I would have expected from people who had undergone such a profound experience. They were like a well-oiled machine, each part moving in perfect synchronicity with the others. It was clear that they were hiding something, that their minds had been altered somehow. The initial interviews were frustrating. They answered my questions readily enough, but their responses were carefully constructed, devoid of any real emotional depth. They spoke of their encounter with the alien intelligence in glowing terms, describing it as a benevolent, transcendent force that had chosen them to guide humanity to a new era of enlightenment. Their memories of the event itself were inconsistent. Hudson's account was detailed and vivid, a narrative of wonder and transformation. Others, like Dr. Nielsen and Captain Carter, had only fragmented recollections, flashes of light and color, and a sense of overwhelming peace. Lieutenant O'Brien claimed to remember nothing at all, his mind a blank slate for the entire period of their disappearance. These discrepancies, far from being random, felt deliberate, as if their memories had been selectively edited, or perhaps even fabricated. It was clear that they had been programmed, somehow. "We were chosen," Hudson said, his voice resonating with a conviction that bordered on the messianic. "We were given a gift, a responsibility to help humanity ascend to a higher plane of existence." He spoke of peace, of unity, of a future free from conflict and suffering. It was a compelling vision, especially in a world teetering on the brink of collapse. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all a carefully constructed facade. It was too perfect, too rehearsed. "And what about those who don't want to ascend?" I asked, my voice challenging him. "What about those who are content with their lives, with their own beliefs?" I was trying to get a reaction out of him, to see past his carefully constructed mask. Hudson's smile didn't falter. "They will be shown the way," he replied, his tone unwavering. "They will come to understand." There was a hint of steel in his voice, a subtle threat that sent a chill down my spine. It was clear that conventional methods were useless. These people were not suffering from any known psychological condition. They were either master manipulators or genuinely believed their own narrative. Either way, I needed to get past their conscious defenses, to delve into the depths of their subconscious minds. I needed to use deep hypnosis. I needed to get Hudson's permission. "I'd like to conduct some further sessions," I said, addressing Hudson directly. "Using deep hypnosis. It will allow me to access your memories, your experiences on a deeper level. It might help us understand what happened to you, how these abilities work. It would also allow me to see the truth, no matter how deeply buried." Hudson studied me for a long moment. The other crew members remained silent, their eyes fixed on their leader. "Very well, Dr. Maxwell," he finally said. "We have nothing to hide." But they did. I was sure of it. Their minds had been tampered with, their memories altered. The first hypnosis session was with Dr. Astrid Nielsen. She was a renowned astrophysicist, a woman of formidable intellect, but under hypnosis, she became almost childlike, her voice hesitant, her memories fragmented and dreamlike. I guided her gently, carefully navigating the labyrinth of her subconscious. The images that emerged were chaotic, disturbing. Flashes of blinding light, like a camera flash going off inches from her face, followed by an unbearable sensation of being stretched, distorted, as if her body was being pulled in multiple directions at once, bones shifting, muscles contorting beyond their natural limits. She described seeing the interior of the ship distort, the metal walls warping, the floor tilting, instruments panel detaching and floating in mid-air. The straight, rigid lines of the ship's corridors curved into arcs, like a funhouse mirror reflection. She saw her own hands in front of her face, the skin becoming translucent, the bones beneath visible, elongated and thin, like a skeleton made of glass. Her crewmates were similarly affected, their bodies twisting, their faces contorted in silent screams. Carter's arm elongated, stretching down a corridor that seemed to extend into infinity. Wei was folded in half backward, his spine bending, yet he showed no outward signs of pain, only terror in his wide, unblinking eyes. It was not a place, but a state of being, of utter disintegration and forced reconfiguration. It was a reality where the physical form was not constant, but malleable, subject to forces beyond human comprehension. And then there was the presence. Not a physical being, but a pressure, a weight that seemed to press down on her from all directions, crushing the air from her lungs, squeezing her internal organs. It was as if the gravity had multiplied 1,000-fold, but without the expected effect of pinning her to the floor. She described it as a constant, overwhelming awareness that permeated the ship, every surface, every object, even the very air they breathed. It wasn't observing them, not in the way a human would. It was cataloguing them, each cell, each thought, each memory. Data points to be collected and analyzed. It felt like being dissected, not with scalpels but with pure thought, every aspect of her being laid bare and examined with cold, clinical detachment. Dr. Nielsen, under hypnosis, began to weep, fat, silent tears rolling down her cheeks, her body trembling not from the memory of physical pain, but from the profound violation she had endured. It wasn't a gift, she stammered, her voice a thin, strained whisper. It was an experiment. We were specimens. Her body began to convulse, her back arching, her hands clenching into fists. It was clear that the memory, even filtered through the layers of her subconscious, was too much to bear. I had to pull her out of the session, bringing her back to the sterile reality of the observation room before the induced memory caused her lasting harm. The subsequent sessions with Captain Carter and Dr. Wei yielded similar results. Fragmented memories of a reality beyond human comprehension. A sense of being manipulated, experimented upon, and ultimately changed at a fundamental level. Their minds had been rewired, their memories altered, their emotions suppressed. They were puppets, dancing to a tune they couldn't even hear. They had been violated in a way I could barely comprehend. Lieutenant O'Brien, however, was a different story. His mind was a fortress, impenetrable even under deep hypnosis. There was nothing there, a void where his memories should have been. It wasn't amnesia, it was something far more profound. It was as if his past had been erased, not just from his mind, but from reality itself. It was deeply unsettling, as if a part of him was missing. Driven by these unsettling revelations, I pushed for access to the Starseeker's black box data. Agent Rodriguez, increasingly distrustful of her superiors and their handling of the situation, agreed to help. She saw what I saw in the crew, that something was not right. She knew that there were those within the agency who wanted to suppress the truth, who saw the crew's powers as a potential weapon, a tool to be exploited. The black box was heavily guarded, the data encrypted with multiple layers of security. But Rodriguez was resourceful. She had her own contacts, her own methods. She was a woman who knew how to navigate the shadows, how to bend the rules when necessary. It took days working around the clock, fueled by stale coffee, but we finally managed to decrypt the data. What we found was chilling. The black box contained sensor readings, communication logs, and video footage from the mission, all of it meticulously time-stamped. It painted a picture far different from the one the crew had presented to the world. The data showed that the Starseeker had encountered something unexpected, something that didn't appear on any star charts, a cosmic anomaly, a region of space where the laws of physics seemed to break down. The ship had been severely damaged, its systems malfunctioning, its crew thrown into chaos. The sensor readings were bizarre, showing wild fluctuations in energy levels, distortions in space-time, and readings that simply didn't make sense. It was as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. The last few minutes of the recording were the most disturbing. The camera, mounted on the bridge, showed the crew huddled together, their faces pale with terror. They were looking at something off-screen, something that was causing the ship to shake violently. There was no sound, only the distorted images and the terrified expressions of the crew. Then, a blinding flash of light filled the screen, and the recording abruptly ended. The ship had lost contact right after this event. This was the moment I realized, the moment of their transformation. This anomaly, this energy, was the source of their powers. But it wasn't a gift. It was something far more sinister. This was the moment they encountered the entity. It was during this time that I began to feel a growing sense of isolation. The agency was keeping me on a tight leash, monitoring my every move. I knew they were watching me, listening to my conversations, reading my reports. They wanted to control the narrative, to shape public perception of the returned crew. And I was a threat to that control. I was getting too close to the truth. I could no longer trust my colleagues, my superiors. I was alone except for Agent Rodriguez, and even she was starting to become wary, paranoid. One evening, while reviewing the black box data yet again, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Dr. Emily Foster. She had heard about my work, about my findings. She was an astrophysicist, known for her radical theories about the nature of the universe, theories that had often been dismissed by the mainstream scientific community. But now, in light of the Starseeker's return and the crew's strange powers, her work was suddenly relevant, even crucial. She offered her assistance. "I believe I can help you understand what happened out there, Dr. Maxwell. I believe I know what they encountered." She was a woman who was not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom, to explore the boundaries of human knowledge. We met in secret, in a dingy corner of the city, far from the prying eyes of the agency. Dr. Foster was a whirlwind of energy, her mind racing with ideas, her conversation peppered with scientific jargon that I struggled to follow. But her core concept was clear. The anomaly the Starseeker encountered was not just an energy field. It was something far more complex, something that existed beyond our current understanding of physics. It was, she believed, a higher dimensional entity. A being that existed outside of our four-dimensional space-time. A being that was using the crew to enter our world. "Think of it like this, Dr. Maxwell," she explained, sketching diagrams on a napkin. "Imagine a two-dimensional being living on a flat plane. It can only perceive length and width. It has no concept of height. Now imagine a three-dimensional object like a sphere passing through that plane. The two-dimensional being would only see a circle, a shape that appears and disappears, changes size and shape, seemingly at random. It wouldn't be able to comprehend the true nature of the sphere." She had a way of explaining complex ideas in a way that even I could understand. "That's what we're dealing with," she continued. "A higher dimensional entity, intersecting with our reality. The crew are like that circle, a manifestation of something far greater. The entity is using them to gain a foothold in our world." Her words sent a chill down my spine. It was a terrifying thought, the idea that we were not alone, that there were beings out there, beings of unimaginable power, that saw us as nothing more than ants, as stepping stones to something greater. We were not dealing with benevolent gods, but with something ancient, powerful, and dangerous. Something that was slowly taking over the crew. The world outside the facility was holding its breath. Inside, we were suffocating. Hudson, once the picture of calm control, was now a live wire, his powers fluctuating wildly. One moment he'd be eerily serene, the next, his eyes would blaze with an unnerving light, and objects around him would vibrate, levitate, or even shatter without warning. He was a tightly wound coil, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. The entity was growing stronger, its influence over him more pronounced. The other crew members weren't faring much better. Dr. Nielsen had become withdrawn, prone to fits of uncontrollable trembling, her eyes wide with a terror she couldn't articulate. Captain Carter, once the stoic soldier, now paced restlessly, muttering to himself, his hands clenching and unclenching as if he were fighting an invisible enemy. He had become aggressive, unpredictable. Lieutenant O'Brien was the worst. He barely moved at all. He was a statue, unresponsive to everything around him. He was already lost to us. They were deteriorating rapidly, their carefully constructed facades cracking under the strain of the entity's growing power. And then the glitches started. A pen on my desk vanished, only to reappear moments later on a shelf across the room. A digital clock on the wall briefly displayed an impossible time, 25:72, before snapping back to the correct sequence. These weren't hallucinations. They were localized distortions in reality, tiny tears in the fabric of space-time, like ripples spreading outward from a dropped stone. They were getting worse and more frequent. One particularly disturbing incident involved a lab technician who walked through a doorway and for a split second seemed to exist in two places at once. A ghostly double of herself lagging a step behind before merging back into a single form. She fainted, and when she came to, she had no memory of the event. It was clear. The anomaly was growing stronger, its influence bleeding into our world, warping reality around the crew, with Hudson as the epicenter. Dr. Foster confirmed my worst fears. "The entity is feeding off Hudson's consciousness," she explained, pointing to a series of complex equations scrawled across a whiteboard. "It's using him as an anchor, a conduit to our reality. The more powerful he grows, the more unstable the anomaly, causing increased distortion in the space around it." The entity was like a parasite, slowly consuming its host, growing stronger with each passing moment. The governments of the world, spurred by reports of the increasingly frequent and bizarre glitches, were demanding action. The public, once enamored with the returned heroes, now viewed them with fear and suspicion. The media, always hungry for a sensational story, had dubbed them the harbingers of chaos. We were on the verge of a global panic, a mass hysteria that could be far more destructive than the anomaly itself. Something had to be done, and fast. Our plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Based on Dr. Foster's analysis of the black box data and my findings from the hypnosis sessions, we theorized that the anomaly was linked to the crew's consciousness, particularly Hudson's. If we could somehow isolate them, sever their connection to the entity, we might be able to contain the damage, perhaps even reverse it. It was a desperate gamble based on a patchwork of theoretical physics and experimental psychology. The solution, as Dr. Foster explained it, was to create a reality bubble, a localized environment where the normal laws of physics applied, isolated from the anomaly's influence. This involved dampening the crew's brainwaves, effectively cutting them off from the entity's frequency. My expertise in sensory deprivation techniques, combined with Dr. Foster's understanding of the anomaly's energy signature, formed the basis of our approach. Agent Rodriguez helped us secure the resources we needed. We couldn't risk moving the crew, not in their current state. Any attempt to transport them could trigger a catastrophic release of energy, a rupture in the fabric of reality that could have devastating consequences. So we had to convert a section of the existing facility into our isolation chamber. We worked around the clock, fueled by caffeine and a desperate hope that we weren't too late. We reinforced walls with lead and copper plating, designed to block electromagnetic radiation. We installed a complex array of sensors and monitoring equipment, all designed to measure and counteract the anomaly's influence. The centerpiece of the chamber was a specially designed bed for each crew member, equipped with a network of electrodes and sensors that would monitor their brain activity and deliver precisely calibrated pulses of electromagnetic energy, designed to dampen their brainwaves and isolate them from the entity's influence. It was effectively a medically induced coma, but one that was specifically tailored to sever their connection to the anomaly. It was a delicate balance, a tightrope walk between life and death. The most difficult part was the deception. We had to lure the crew into the chamber without arousing their suspicion, without triggering a violent reaction. We told them it was a new treatment, a way to stabilize their powers, to help them regain control. Hudson, his paranoia amplified by the entity's influence, was immediately distrustful. His eyes, now almost black, seemed to bore into my soul, searching for any hint of deceit. He questioned every detail, every aspect of the procedure. He was like a cornered animal, ready to lash out at any moment. "This is a trap," he said, his voice low and menacing during one of our final briefings. "You're trying to contain us, to neutralize us." There was a slight tremor in the room, the lights flickering momentarily. "No, Commander," I replied, keeping my voice calm and steady. "We're trying to help you. We're trying to stabilize the energy field. This will help you control your powers, prevent any further incidents." It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. The other crew members, weakened and confused, were more compliant. They seemed to sense that something was wrong, that they were losing their grip on reality, but they were too far gone to resist. They were like puppets, their strings being pulled by an unseen force. They followed us willingly, almost gratefully, into the chamber. The moment the heavy steel door clanged shut behind them, I felt a wave of both relief and dread wash over me. The specially designed materials, a combination of lead, copper, and a newly synthesized polymer based on Dr. Foster's research, immediately began to dampen the crew's brainwave activity. The effect was clear and immediate. The distortions that had become a constant presence in the facility ceased. The air felt cleaner, lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. We watched them through the reinforced cameras, their vital signs displayed on a bank of monitors. They were alive, but in a state of profound unconsciousness. Their brainwave activity was minimal, flatlining in some cases, highlighting the effectiveness of the dampening field. They were effectively cut off, not just from the outside world, but from their own minds, from the entity that had taken root within them. They were in a deep, dreamless sleep, a state of suspended animation from which they might never awaken. It was a victory of sorts, but a hollow one. We had saved the world, but at a terrible cost. We had severed their connection to the anomaly, but we had also severed their connection to reality. They were alive, but not living. Had we done the right thing? Had we saved the world? Or had we simply traded one nightmare for another? The world slowly began to recover, but it was a recovery marked by a new kind of fear. A fear not of the unknown, but of the known. We now knew that we were not alone, that there were forces out there beyond our comprehension, forces that could reach into our world and reshape it at will. The knowledge was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of our vulnerability. The encounter had shattered our sense of security, our belief in the fundamental laws of the universe. We were adrift in a cosmos far stranger and more dangerous than we had ever imagined. I was left with a profound sense of loss, a sense of emptiness that echoed the void left behind by the crew's disconnection. I had played my part. I had helped to avert a catastrophe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow failed. I had failed to save the crew, failed to understand the true nature of the entity, failed to find a solution that didn't involve such a terrible sacrifice. I was a psychologist, a healer of minds, and yet I had been forced to participate in the destruction, or at least the silencing, of 5 human lives. It was a heavy burden to bear. The silence from the stars, once a source of wonder, now seemed to mock us, a constant reminder of the vast, unknowable forces that lay beyond our reach and the lingering threat that might one day return. We had won this battle, but the war, I feared, was far from over. We were forever in the entity's debt. It had shown us our weakness, and we could never forget that. The world was safe for now, but the silence was deafening.